But let's take our viewers now to that briefing at the Union Buildings in Pretoria. Let's listen in.
Suggestions, even demands for people seeking to be part of the program in one capacity or the other, whether defined or not defined. We get requests on a regular basis of people seeking to be part of the success of this program. So today we have a very short program with the President and the ministers that are responsible for driving Operation Vulindlela. You will hear some reflections on the program when it started. The President will outline the task that he has given the OV team, and I will share some tidbits about members of the team, about what happened at the start of the program, information that we don't often share in the public domain, just to give Operation Vulindlela a bit of a human face. So, how did this name come about, Vulindlela? After the program was conceptualized with the leadership of the President, together with the then late former Minister of Finance, Minister Tito Mboweni, we needed a name. And Minister Mboweni was very much in love with the hit song by our superstar Brenda Fassie, Vulindlela. And there's a video, in fact, which I will post on my X handle of the minister taking on the dance floor with Brenda Fassie to the Vulindlela tune. So that's how the name of the program came about. And when the team started, there were only about 5 or 6 people in the team. It was a very small team. At the time, there was Duncan Peterse, who's now the Director General at the Department of National Treasury. There was Rudy Dix, the head of the PMO in the presidency. There was Saul Maska, the Director of Strategy in the PMO. There was Vuyo Guma from National Treasury, and there was Mahesh Fakir. That was the initial OV team. I did mention Sean Phillips, who was the leader of that team. He's now the Director General at the Department of Water and Sanitation. So OV Director General. That seems to be the path. I think that's why a lot of people want to be associated with the program. So at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite the Honorable Minister in the Presidency, who is a co-sponsor or a co-driver together with her counterpart at the Ministry of Finance, Minister Kotongwane, to come forward to just give us a few remarks, and thereafter we'll invite the Minister of Finance, Bomakadze, over to you.
Thank you. Program Director, you forgot to mention, may the soul of former Minister Tito Mboweni rest in peace, but also to inform Rudy Dix not to have ambitions of the Director General. His Excellency President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, colleagues, ministers and deputy ministers, representatives of business, senior government officials led by the Director General in the Presidency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As we are gathered today to officially launch Phase 2 of Operation Vulindlela that Vincent has just given a colorful history to it, this is the government's flagship economic reform program with an aim of driving rapid and inclusive economic growth and job creation through structural reforms. In its first phase, OV focused on 5 areas which were identified as posing serious constraints on economic growth. These are energy, logistics, water, telecommunications, and the visa system. We are all aware of what we've went through the load shedding period, and also the challenges of water that continue to strain our country, but which we assist in addressing. Today, we've made significant progress in advancing reforms in each of these areas. In actual fact, all the reforms which were part of Phase 1 are either completed or on track. and National Treasury estimates that those reforms which have already been implemented or are underway will unlock more than 500 billion in new investment in areas such as renewable energy generation and telecommunications infrastructure. Operation Vulindlela Phase 2 will unleash a second wave of reforms, and this will extend the agenda into the areas of local government, which has been a major challenge in the country as it relates to service delivery, spatial inequality, and the digital transformation as we come into reality of the digital age. Some of these areas have held back the country's economic growth for more than a decade and have exacerbated unemployment, poverty, and inequality. The priorities which Cabinet has approved for this next phase will decisively address these challenges by tackling the root causes of local government underperformance, reshaping housing and public transport policy to promote spatial integration, and advancing the digital transformation of government to improve access to service and enable innovation. The work of Operation Vulindlela is fully aligned to the minimum program of the Government of National Unity as reflected in the Statement of Intent, including to achieve more rapid, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, to create a more just society by tackling poverty and spatial inequalities, and to stabilize local government, and to build state capacity and create a professional, merit-based, corruption-free and developmental public service. It is also reflected in the medium-term development plan, which positions the economic reform program as the apex priority of the 6th administration. So that I don't complete all the messages, all the words of my colleague, the Minister of Finance, let me conclude by saying, in Operation Vulindlela, we appreciate the partnership we enjoy from business, civil society as we drive the agenda, and the commitment of government officials in all spheres to ensure the full implementation of the structural reforms as we all commit to getting our country in a better economic growth trajectory. I thank you.
I think we can do better with a round of applause. Thank you very much, Minister Nchabeni. So one of my first experiences with the Operation Vulindlela team was in the early days of formulating the Energy Action Plan. I had been in the presidency for about 2 months. I was getting accustomed to attending meetings on weekends, and the president summoned everybody to an urgent crisis meeting, and this was during the early days of forming the Energy Crisis Committee, and we assembled virtually on a Saturday afternoon, and Rudy Dix was going to lead the technical presentation alongside the team that was led by DG Baleni. And at the time, most of you will remember that the threshold was first raised to 100 megawatts to allow the private sector to invest in projects below that size. And at this particular meeting, the president suggested, with a slight influence from the OV team, if I may add, without taking anything away from the president, that the threshold be raised to 1,000 megawatts. At which time Minister Mantashe, who, contrary to popular demand, is a great supporter of renewables, responded and said, if you're going to do that, you may as well remove it altogether. And the president, who often allows everybody to speak when he chairs meetings and waits until the end, decided at that moment to seize the opportunity. A number of hands were already up on the screen, a couple of ministers, senior officials who were attending the meeting. Commissioner Kisveta had his hand up, and the president realized that this was an opportunity he was not going to miss, and the president said, good idea, let's remove it all together. The rest is history. All the speakers that followed after that in that meeting started with supporting the removal, the complete removal of the threshold at the time. That was my first experience with the OV team and their quiet influence in the inner workings of government. At this stage, I'd like to invite to the podium Ubabu Madiba, the Minister of Finance, the Honorable Enoch Godongwana. Please, let's give him a round of applause.
Mr. President, colleagues, my colleagues, ministers around, deputy ministers, DGs, deputy DGs, invited guests, and fellow South Africans. These journalists, Mr. President, were already asking me about budget 301. In 2019, Minister Tito Mboweni and his team at Treasury published a document on these structural reforms. I remember at the time I was the chair of the economic transformation in the ANC. I was required to pilot this document and discussion in the ANC, which we did unprecedented. In 2 months, this was adopted supported by the ANC. All that is history. In October, then 2020, Operation Vulindlela was established as a reform implementation structure aimed at driving a far-reaching economic reform agenda. At the time, it was recognized that the pandemic presented an opportunity not just for recovery, but for renewal and reform to shift our economic growth path onto a higher trajectory, creating jobs and therefore improving lives. The plan focused on addressing the long-standing constraints which have held back economic growth for more than a decade. There's a strong consensus that economic growth is constrained by structural factors such as shortfall in electricity supply, an inefficient and unreliable freight logistics system, and indeed crime and corruption, which sometimes is not linked to the economic performance. These constraints inhibit the real economic and undermine investor confidence. In addition, rising public spending without an associated increase in economic growth has resulted in unsustainable debt burden. Further, high borrowing costs squeeze spending on real goods, services, and investment. The only viable solution is to stabilize the fiscal trajectory. To stabilize the fiscal trajectory is therefore to increase the rate of growth. Higher sustained growth enables countries to further strengthen the propensity to grow by increasing the fiscal space to address other critical social and economic concerns, such as improvements and access to quality health service and education. The radical economic reform is required to achieve this higher level of economic growth and create a virtuous cycle of higher confidence in the short term. This improves growth outcomes over a long term. By alleviating load shedding, improving the performance of the logistics system, reducing the cost of data, improving water supply, enabling the country to attract the skills it needs, the reforms already underway through OV Phase 1 will provide a significant boost to the economy in the medium term once fully implemented. The items I've outlined are some of the achievements we've made. Some of the achievement was made on electricity, logistics, telecommunication, water, and visa system and skills. I don't want to repeat that. My colleague has made reference to. The key question, where to from now? In order to drive more rapid and inclusive growth over the next 5 years, we must accelerate economic reform. A commitment to swift implementation of reforms is required across government to lower the cost of doing business, reduce regulatory bottlenecks, and provide policy certainty. This in turn will promote investment, support economic export orientation, enable job creation, and reinforce growth. Enhancing efficiency in key sectors such as transport and logistics by restructuring state-owned entities, improving efficiency of investment, and encouraging competition will bring down administrative prices over the long term. By the way, the governor of the Reserve Bank always cautions that part of the difficulty is administrative prices. The immediate priority is therefore to sustain the momentum already developed and follow through on the implementation of existing reforms in order to realize their full impact. This will require completing the reforms underway as well as deepening those reforms which have already been initiated in the energy, logistics, and water sector and visa regime. However, other structural constraints to growth remain. Additional reforms will be prioritized in the next phase of OV to promote higher and more inclusive long-term growth. The reform agenda will prioritize, among other things, strengthen local government and improve the delivery of basic services. B, harnessing digital public infrastructure as a driver of growth and inclusive growth. And C, creating dynamic and integrated systems to enable economic activity. I must add something which is not my speech, which crossed my mind as I was coming. And without demanding it from my DG, I think one of the issues that need to be part of this restructuring is procurement reforms. Quite a challenge with the reform agenda with the procurement in government. Government will also be prioritizing improving the effectiveness and efficiency of spending by making progress on the implementation of recommendations of spending reviews. With over 240 spending reviews undertaken by National Treasury and Provincial Treasuries since 2013, government has a solid foundation with which to not only introduce cost-cutting measures, but to systematically assess whether public expenditure is effectively aligned with the priorities of this government and delivers in the best possible value for money. In closing, the road ahead is challenging, but with agility, commitment to reform, we can achieve greater competitiveness and a more inclusive economy in line with this administration's priorities. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. As we celebrate Operation Vulindlela, you've assured us that uzovuli budget. Ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, I'd like to invite His Excellency, the President, to give us his keynote address. Mr. President. We can do better with the applause.
Oh, come on, sit down. Please sit down. Even the media must sit down. Thank you very much, Vincent. As you started, I said to the minister, he's giving his speech now. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see all of you. Program Director, thank you, and ministers and deputy ministers here present, and directors general. And it's good to have quite a number of directors general here. And the leaders of our state-owned enterprises are also here present, as well as representatives of our social partners, particularly business, and I see some labor people, and all of you distinguished guests. This is not a solemn occasion. This is supposed to be the launch of Vulindlela 2. And thank you very much for joining us and being part of this whole process of, in a way, celebrating what we have been through, the journey that we embarked upon, and also being witness to the next phase of our economic as well as social reform journey through Operation Vulindlela. I add social because much of what we have done in Vulindlela, one, has also had an impact on the lives of ordinary people. For instance, when electricity started being generated properly, that had an impact on our people. And therefore, the impact has not been only on economic matters, but it has also been on the social life of our people. As you have heard, we initiated Operation Vulindela in the aftermath of COVID-19, and when we were dealing with its devastating economic impact on our country and on the lives of our people. The pandemic had arrived just as we were emerging from more than a decade, as Minister Godongwana said, of stagnant economic growth, as well as rising unemployment, and particularly as we were emerging from the era of state capture. When I addressed a joint sitting of Parliament in October 2020, I said, in the aftermath of a fire, green shoots often begin to emerge. The ashes, I continued to say, enrich the soil and new life takes root to replace what was lost. This is often what happens in nature and in life. And over the past 4 years, we have seen the green shoots of economic reform sprouting out. Through far-reaching reforms in the electricity sector, we have substantially reduced the severity as well as the frequency, and many of us will testify to this frequency of load shedding, relieving a constraint on growth which had strangled our economy for years. And the electricity challenge that we faced was of a special type, of an extraordinary type, that made South Africans very angry, frustrated, and dejected in many, many ways, because the resource they had become accustomed to, continuous electricity, had been taken away from them. I remember once coming back from a sea fishing trip. As I got off the boat, a young boy in Cape Town said, "Mr. President, can I talk to you?" He was like 6, 7 years old. And I said, "Yes, you can." And he said, "Can you please bring electricity back?" And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because I want to watch my shows on TV." So it had had an overarching impact on the lives of ordinary people. Now, these reforms that we embarked upon have enabled investment in energy generation, have also unlocked billions of rands in new investment in renewable energy in every part of the country, but more especially in the Northern Cape, the largest landmass province of our country and the smallest population, which had anemic economic growth, is now seeing enormous growth as billions have been pouring in an area which Dr. Ramaphosa describes as the highest radiation place in our country. We have embarked on a major reform of our ports as well as the rail system through the freight logistics roadmap. We have opened the rail network to competition, to involvement of players by others, and invited the private sector to participate in our port terminals on a concessionary basis, while ensuring that our network infrastructure, yes, remains owned by the state. Now, the completion of the spectrum auction enabled significant investment in telecommunications, and billions of rands also flowed into the fiscus through the auction process a process which is done by a number of countries around the world. But that has also improved network quality in our country and has also led to the reduction of data costs for every South African. Although our data costs are still on the high end, they still need to be brought down so that we are on par with many other countries where data costs are not extremely expensive. The water use license system, which once served as a barrier to investment, particularly because those who sought to utilize our water, who needed the permits, had to wait for up to 3 years, also needed some reforms. Now that system works efficiently and has allowed projects in forestry, in mining, in manufacturing, and a number of other sectors to proceed. So these are some of the reforms that have been engendered by this Vulindlela process. As of last year, we have implemented an entirely new framework for skilled visas to attract investment and encourage businesses to establish themselves in our country and to create jobs. We've been able to attract those with money, with skills, to have much easier entry into our country through our visa system. All of this progress has been made possible thanks to the cooperation and commitment of relevant government departments. One of the key achievements that we continue to make is to continue breaking down the silos in government and to enable governments to, departments rather, to work together and to enable colleagues to walk away from this mentality of doing things on their own, in their own little corners, to work together. And this is what Vulindlela has been able to achieve. To also bring state-owned enterprises into the realms of working together with government, as well as social partners like business, as well as unions. Now, I commend in particular our ministers, our deputy ministers, our directors general, and our CEOs and various other officials who have provided leadership to these efforts. And leadership is what they have provided, because it is often difficult for people to strip away this silo mentality and start working together in an integrated manner. Over the last 4 years, Operation Vulindlela has become a government-wide initiative. When it started, to be honest, there was quite a bit of reluctance because people had become accustomed to doing their own things in their own ways, in their own departments, and with their own officials as ministers and with directors general with their own staff. But through Vulindlela, that is one of the key achievements. We've been able and succeed, and we are continuing to succeed, to break down the walls and to get everyone to work together. This is meaningful progress, and it will enable higher growth and higher government capacity, or better government capacity, in the years to come. But much as we are doing all this, our economy continues to be held back by a number of structural inefficiencies, and may I add, a number of regulatory inefficiencies, and of course a number of practice inefficiencies as well, such as the way we work, such as the problems, as Minister Godongwana said, of procurement, corruption, and a whole number of other challenges. Challenges that we are alive to and are addressing at this point in time. Our economy needs to grow, everyone agrees, in the GNU and outside the GNU. We need to grow much faster to create the jobs that our country needs to achieve the prosperity that we all yearn for. We need more rapid growth to enable government to spend more money on healthcare, on education, on social grants, on infrastructure, and other key areas to improve the lives of our people. The Minister will deliver Budget 3.0 on the 21st. And the budget will, to a large extent, be a different budget from what we have had in past years. It's a budget that is going to make us look forward. It's a budget that's going to commit a lot of money also to infrastructure. And you could say for the first time in many, many years, we are now going to be able to spend up to R1 trillion on infrastructure over the medium term. Growth is the only way to achieve fiscal sustainability and social progress in our country. And this budget will speak to that. That is why, as the Government of National Unity, we've committed ourselves to sustaining the momentum which was achieved by Operation Vulindlela on the economic reform agenda. But a reform agenda that also has an impact on the social life of our people. So we need bold, far-reaching reform initiatives to revive and to reshape our economy. Our immediate priority is to follow through on the reforms that we have initiated and the reforms that are already underway so that they can realize their full impact. And in the energy sector, we will establish, and Minister Ramaphosa is working on that, a competitive electricity market governed by the Electricity Regulation Amendment Act, which came into effect earlier this year. Now, this is a revolutionary change for our country. This is a sea change because we are now beginning to embark on a journey that many countries have embarked upon years ago. And I often cite a country like China, which is pursuing socialism with Chinese characteristics. You would have expected that they would be the ones who will hold on to an only government and state-owned electricity generation, distribution, as well as transmission system. They have introduced competition, and they've introduced a number of generators so that they compete against each other to bring costs down. That is precisely the revolutionary change that has been initiated in our own country. We're now going to have, as we are now, having a number of generators of energy, and this will enable multiple generators to compete, yes, to produce electricity at the lowest cost and with the greatest efficiency. So if one generator is found to be wanting, the other generator of electricity will be outshining them, and they will also up their game. Now, to support this, we will complete the restructuring of Eskom and establish an independent transmission system operator to create a level playing field for market competition, to address the lack of grid capacity, because our grid is now overloaded. We need 14,000 kilometers of more grid capacity. And this is what we're working on. The Minister of Electricity and Energy has launched the first round of independent transmission projects to procure 1,000 kilometers of new transmission lines. Now, these reforms will ultimately mean lower costs and a reliable electricity supply for all South Africans. In the logistics sector, private rail companies will soon be able to operate on our freight rail network, and they will be given lines that they can operate, following the publication of the network statement by Transnet in December of last year. Now, this will enable a lot of investment, in fact, I should say massive investment, in rolling stock, and also enable more goods to be transported by rail. helping our export industries to grow. Where we are right now, we are not transporting as much goods as we need to because of a number of constraints which Transnet and the Minister of Transport can speak to. Now, with opening up the lines and dedicating certain lines to those who have money to invest, which currently the state doesn't have, we will be able to transport more goods, and through that, yes, Transnet will be able to stabilize the whole network and be able to earn fees. These reforms will generate, yes, significant capital and new revenue streams for Transnet to help stabilize its operations and enable it to invest more and to innovate more and to get more capacity, more skilled people. We will establish on the water side the National Water Resources Infrastructure Agency as a dedicated entity to own, manage and invest in our water resources. We have found that when we have dedicated agencies like we have with Sandral, which we established years ago, we are able to achieve greater success because there is focus as these agencies continue to operate under our ministries. So we're going to do the same with water. Now, through the Water Partnerships Office, we will support public-private partnerships in water infrastructure to reduce, yes, the leaks, access new water sources, and improve wastewater treatment as well. And we do believe that this we will be able to do through a national agency that will be able to get greater efficiencies. Now, to address the root causes of service delivery failures, we will also amend, and in the process of amending the Water Services Act, to separate the role of municipalities as water service authorities and water service providers. Separating the two roles will lead to greater capabilities and efficiencies. We should say that the days of standing by and watching while taps in our townships, in our factories and in our rural areas run dry, or where raw sewage runs into not only our river system but into the homes of our people, should be over, and we want that to end. We will take action to make sure that the right of every South African to quality drinking water is protected, and the right for our industries to function properly with good water will also be something that we see happening. Now, on the visa system, we will ensure that the recommendations of the work visa review are fully implemented and introduce an electronic travel authorization system to support growth in tourism, but also to support growth in those who want to come and invest in our country. The Minister of Home Affairs has already introduced the points-based system to make it easier for highly skilled people who want to come into our country, people who have skills, who have money, to come into our country with ease, who can contribute to our economy, while at the same time enforcing our immigration laws more effectively, particularly to combat illegal immigration. Now, through these reforms, I do believe that we will complete the reform of our network industries that we began in the previous phase and address the binding constraints on growth. And we have to be grateful that we've had Treasury as well as the team in the presidency corralling and coordinating all of government to work together. And we have had great success. And to those who might think that, well, this is not as meaningful as all that, we just need to look at the success that we've had on our electricity side, because now the lights are on. However, this is not enough. We need growth that is both rapid as well as inclusive. We need growth that serves, yes, the millions of our people who remain unemployed and young people who cannot see a way into the labor market. And we need growth that improves the daily lives of our people by fixing the infrastructure that is broken. And I want to engender a new culture in our country for all of us to look after our infrastructure. One of the diseases that continues to beset us as a nation is that we don't really care for our infrastructure. And at times we go to a point of damaging infrastructure. I had a walk through this building yesterday, Union Buildings, and I then asked for the facilities manager. I said, "Where is the facilities manager?" And walked around with her this morning. And I said, we must look after this resource, because I could see a number of areas that are broken, tiles that are chipped, and areas that need repair. And I said, I want you, facilities manager, to ensure that you have a very strong culture of maintaining the infrastructure we have. And I even said to her, you know, wear my eyes, because wherever I go, I look out for things that are falling apart and say they must be fixed. So we need to look after our infrastructure, and as far as we are concerned, that is why in the next phase of Operation Vulindlela 2, that we are launching today, we will want to introduce and implement reforms in 3 areas. And Minister Godongwane now is beginning to suggest, and I agree with him, that we should also look at procurement. Procurement, as he and I said earlier, is one of the areas that sets us back. So we may well add procurement in the new phase of Vulindlela, and we'll discuss it with the team. First, we will address the legacy of apartheid, spatial inequality, which has forced many South Africans to live far away from economic activities, and we see it wherever we go. The poorest South Africans spend as much as 40% of their income on transport just to get to work, more than it happens in any other country in the world. Imagine you earn 10,000 rand and 4,000 rand of it you spend on transport. The structure of our cities has to change to enable people to access work. In many other countries in the world, the poorest people live in the city. Those who are more affluent live outside the city. The opposite is the case in our country. And that was an apartheid construct. This means that we need to change our housing policy so that people can choose where they want to live through demand-side subsidies for home ownership and affordable rentals. While the millions of homes that we have built since 1994, and we have built millions, have given families shelter as well as dignity at an unprecedented scale, we cannot continue to build houses on the periphery of our cities and our towns. This must be reversed. We will therefore accelerate the release of publicly owned land and buildings for affordable housing, with a particular focus on inner cities. And we will get our local government colleagues to focus on this. And we will clear the backlog of title deeds for affordable housing, while at the same time making the titling system more accessible as well as affordable. This will be one of our key reforms. This will turn houses into an asset for poor households, and it will enable those households to access credit and use their asset to advance themselves. And finally, we are going to undertake a comprehensive regulatory review to remove the barriers that still exists, to low-cost housing development, and also to incentivize investment, to make investment much easier and quicker in urban areas as opposed to outlying areas. These reforms will help to turn our cities and our towns into thriving centers of economic activity. I'm going to look very carefully and closely at the plan, the turnaround plan that the mayor of Johannesburg just announced a few minutes ago, and he said he's sending me the plan publicly on national TV, and we have received the plan. So we will examine that, and we will want to see whether it addresses this issue and this challenge I'm talking about. The second area of reform for this phase of Operation Vulindlela 2 is to improve the performance of local government. Many of our municipalities are unable to deliver basic services to households and businesses. Now, Operation Vulindlela has set out a clear agenda for local government reform, which starts with improving the delivery of water, electricity services through professional utilities. Utilities should have the right technical skills, they should have strong regulation and oversight, and they should be rid of any form of corruption as well. And they should have full control of their billing and revenue functions to allow them to invest in infrastructure and maintenance too. Another key step is to strengthen local government administration. We will work to ensure that capable, qualified people are appointed to senior positions in municipalities, such as municipal managers as well as chief financial officers. This is a matter that occupied my discussion with the Auditor General when she presented a recent report. Now, this will be done by extending the mandate of the Public Service Commission to local government and taking action against municipalities that fail to comply with minimum competency standards that we want to see adhered to. The Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs has initiated a process to update the white paper on local government, which includes a review of the institutional structure and functioning of local government. And finally, National Treasury will review the local government fiscal framework, including the design of conditional grants, which we continue to give to our municipalities, to ensure that the revenue of municipalities matches their responsibilities. Now, the third area of focus for Operation Vulindlela 2 is the digital transformation process. Last month, Cabinet approved a digital transformation roadmap to drive the adoption of digital technologies in government and to build digital public infrastructure that can be used by all South Africans. Many other countries or governments in the world have already acceded to this. We are miles behind. And in fact, I often say our people are far ahead. They are tech savvy, they are digitally more capable, and government needs to catch up with where they are. Now, this will include a digital identity system, rapid payment, to expand payments, financial inclusion rather, and to enable people to access services like applying for an ID or a passport online. I say our people are far advanced because I saw this during COVID when we introduced the special grant for distress. We got up to 11 million people to access the money digitally without having to run to a bank or wherever. They were able to do so. And I was hugely impressed by our own people with their tech-savvy capability. So they are already ahead of us, and we now need to catch up. The process of reform is always never easy. It is often contested, and it is often contested by insiders because there are vested interests of one sort or another
everyone wants to hold on and to hog their area of work. And through Vulindlela, we've opened it up, and we'll continue to do so. So Vulindlela has been a transformative process in government that has enabled all of government to work together in a very cooperative way. We still have a long way to go, yet we have a very simple choice to make. If we do not reform our economy, and if we do not reform the way we work, our economy will not grow, and we will not be able to create jobs. If we do not reform the way we work, we will not be able to satisfy the aspirations of our people. Unemployment will continue to rise, the level of dissatisfaction amongst our people will continue to rise, and poverty will increase. So the choice is very simple. On the other hand, if we implement these reforms, and some aspects of the reforms will be difficult, either at local government level or getting government departments to work more digitally, yes, they will be difficult, but if we do so swiftly and boldly, we will place our economy and our government on a path of growth and renewal. And the cooperation that we will engender between our government, our social partners, particularly labor, business, and civil society, will yield great dividends for us. And we will be able to address what I call generational problems. There is a generation of South Africans that does not know what it is to live in a country that is growing, in an economy that is growing. They have never experienced rising incomes. They've never had a feeling that jobs are increasing and they can walk out of their homes and go and seek a job and get it. They have, and a number of businesses have not been seeing the growth that they need to see. And we therefore need to ensure that we have expanding opportunities for both our people and also our businesses. It is therefore our intention to ensure that every South African feels the benefit of rapid, sustained, and inclusive growth, but also capability on the part of government. And that is why we will not halt our efforts to reform the economy and to improve the capability of the state, and to fundamentally transform both and to remove the constraints on our growth. We have established what I believe is significant momentum. We now have good signposts through the priorities that we've set up as the Government of National Unity, and it is therefore our responsibility to grow a flourishing crop and to ensure that all South Africans can, in the end, reap the benefits of the harvest. And this is what Vulindlela 2 is going to be all about, as we complete Vulindlela 1 as well. So we've bedded down a very good foundation, and we're now embarking on building greater growth and capability going forward. And I am sure that as these reforms take effect, we will be able to see growth. And I should say that many countries around the world know that it is through reforms that they can embark upon that they see growth, and the same should apply to us. So growth is what we aim for, and reform will be the tool that we use to achieve that growth. I'd like to thank you for being here at the launch of Vulindlela 2. Thank you very much.
Well, a very good afternoon if you've just joined us. Of course, a number of stories that are happening for you today, including, of course, that briefing and launch of Phase 2 of Operation Vulindela by President Cyril Ramaphosa, and you'll see it as a 13-page document in terms of additional reforms that have been added over the 5 key priorities and focus areas of phase 1 of Operation Vulindlela. Of course, Samkele Maseko is monitoring those developments for us, and we'll speak to him a little bit later just to unpack the significance of this.